Welcome to day 2 of the 2023 State of Medical Device True Quality Summit Series. If you didn't catch yesterday's session, you can access the recordings on the replay section of the website. This session is going to run for about 35 minutes. We will have time at the end for any questions. However, if any questions come up throughout this presentation, please ask in the Q&A section of the chat on the right-hand side, and we will get to as many of them as possible. Any questions that we're not able to get into, we will put them into the MedTech Excellence community following this session, and we will answer them there. We'll make sure that there's a link in the chat for access to the community if you haven't already had a chance to get in there. You'll also be able to speak directly to these speakers and any of your peers in there. So feel free to share that link with anyone in your team. Now, today we are going to be talking about leveraging modern software technologies, MedTech's best kept secret. With us today, we have Damini Agarwal, Director of Product Development at Infinite Biomedical Technologies, Sam Pathak, CEO of NSV, Maxime Roshan, Director, Quality Assurance and Clinical Affairs at Puzzle Medical Devices, and Michael Roberts, Vice President, Sales and Marketing at SPK and Associates. Thank you all for joining us today. Okay, so question 1. Modernizing is happening in the world all around us. So Damini, we're gonna go ahead and start with you. The MedTech industry is no exception. What does it mean to modernize as a medical device company to you at IBT?
I think that's a great question. You know, if I were to draw a parallel to the technology we make, I think it should make things more efficient. It should make things easier for the users. So, you know, it should be easier for the company to operate the QMS. You know, it should be easy for us to adopt new solutions. And I think most importantly, we need to be prepared for change. I think that is the true essence of modernization, is how quickly you can adapt to change. And I think at IBT, we really believe in that value.
Yeah. Sam and Max, do you as well feel the same thing? How quickly you adapt to change is really a key point?
Yeah, of course. And I think one of the basic solutions to adapt faster to change is, first of all, like we all did, I hope, but get rid of all the paper-based system. This is the first step to adapt fastly to changes.
Yeah, I totally agree with Max and Damini. Thank you, Jessica. But you know, the way I look at modernizing is scalability and timescales. Right. So every other industry, you know, has moved forward when it comes to the areas of Lean Six Sigma, high reliability, high quality products, where they're making millions, hundreds of millions of parts. I think we can borrow from those industries and really improve the way we modernize the whole surveillance of and quality of products that are being developed. So yeah, scalability and timescales. We have to stop thinking even as startups, you know, the mindset is to think about today. What do we need to innovate today? But I think we need to think of bigger timescales. What do we want to be, right? As giants, we are small companies right now, but what do we want to be in the future? So I think modernizing software processes are very, very important.
And
Michael,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Max, if you've got anything to add there.
Well, yeah, just to rebound quickly, I think I really agree with Sam, and one of the key in this is also to you know, the old way for manufacturing a medical device was to have supplier manufacturing almost everything and just getting like either assembling ourselves, or even this, it could be outsourced. But a way to adapt very quickly to changes or to unplanned event is to get some in-house equipment. Since everything is cheaper now, you can get very nice in-house equipment at the beginning of a startup, and it allows us to iterate faster and make change. You know, there's no more lead time of 4 months before realizing that something doesn't work. You can test it in a few days.
And then, Michael, did you have anything to add to what Max and Sam were saying around time?
100% support everything that was said here, because I think those are the key things, is getting things to market. But the one thing that wasn't said, I think, with the question about modernizing, it's a little different with startups versus large organizations. When you say modernizing, right? There's a scale. Sam hit on the scale thing. Like that is, it's really important to understand what little tweaks can be done for large organizations that can have a massive modernization impact, right? So that, I think that's a difference that wasn't brought up before, but I fully support everything that was said. Like getting to market quickly, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, those little things certainly add up. Now, getting to market quickly. So, Michael, pre-market companies tend to overestimate time to market by 53%. First, what do you think of that statistic? And then what do you think may be causing that very significant overestimate?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of minutia. There's a lot of little things that drag things down. Max even mentioned the getting rid of the paper, because there is you know, a lot of compliance requirements, but you still have smarter ways to do it. So trying to find ways to maximize the need for all the compliance stuff, I think, is really important. And that, you know, from somebody who's worked in high-tech organizations over the years, I've seen a lot of people get frustrated when they have to slow down for something, whether it's governance or compliance or whatever. And if you can help reduce the you know, still accomplish all the compliance and governance and all those type of requirements, but I think there's a really important piece of getting rid of the minutia. And if you think about that, getting rid of the waste, I think it completely erases that, or starts to erase that 53%.
So, Damini, Max, have you guys misestimated your time to market? And what do you feel about that 53%?
So I think, yes, I think for sure. I think, you know, you speak to any MedTech company for any project, you know, they're probably going to err on the side of overestimation, especially if you speak to the compliance department, because, you know, it's always better to build in a few buffers than not have them in. But I think a lot of that overestimation is also contributed to by things like not thinking about compliance early enough. So, you know, when you're in a last minute scramble and you're trying to get an understanding of what really, it's one thing to develop the next best product, but, you know, the more you delay in understanding what it takes to get it to the market, I think that builds in a lot of overestimation. The other thing is the changing of the regulatory landscape. So, you know, in the last 5 years, at least, the global regulatory landscape has changed pretty significantly. And what that does is it, you become outdated very fast if you're not on top of the changes. So, you know, something that you might have researched 2 years ago when you were planning the timeline of your project may not hold true, you know, 2 years later when you're really getting to the point of, you know, getting things to the market. So I think, in my opinion, those are the two biggest contributors that I've seen very commonly across, you know, companies that I've spoken with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
on my side, go ahead, Sam.
No, please, Max,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, some other factor. One of them that I've experienced by the past was to, you know, think that some milestone or goal of in the timeline are a straight line. You know, just as for prototyping, we often think like, okay, we will prototype this, it will work first time, and then we'll do the V&V or stuff like that. But it's a circle. So, you know, it can be frustrating when you experience it for the first time, but this is, I think, the only real way to have a reliable and effective product that can be approved. Other than that, maybe another one I could say is to neglect the manufacturing scale up. So, you know, in order to perform for a physical product, I would say, but in order to perform all the verification and the validation, we need to have a traceable production line and stuff like that. And this is when doing the planning, this is often something we forget. So we just say, okay, we will prototype this, we'll do user needs input, plan the verification protocol, and then, okay, we need samples to be able to prove the safety and efficacy of the product. So something we need to take into account very early on.
Yeah, so actually my feeling on this is that I think that's a low number, 53%. I think estimates are just that, right? And they tend to, in our case, I think we underestimated, because all of us came from another industry. We came from the semiconductor industry. So not understanding the regulatory landscape was a flaw in our group, and that hole needed to be filled in the last 6 years. So, by the way, one of the attendees basically noted that typically there are delays and so on. I totally agree. We underestimated, but if we had better knowledge, I think we would have overestimated. There's a CYA approach also that you have to that has to be taken into account when these things come out. But I think it's a lot of it's historical, it's human mindset to make sure that we are under promising and over performing, right? We want to make sure that we do that. So that is one aspect. The other thing I think is very important is time to market. I think involves a confluence of multiple tools, abilities within the organization, right? QMS, PLM, ERP, and CRM coming together. And I think, if you look at the entire solution that you've implemented, in your organization, I think you can become very, very efficient at delivering products into the market, whether they are a software-based medical device or a tangible hardware or hybrid type of a device.
Sam, you brought up a perfect segue into the next question, is that the survey found that on average, companies are using 9 distinct software tools to manage that product lifecycle with quality, development, clinical activities. That's a lot of software tools. One, how many is NSV, if you're willing to share? How many are you guys using? And in terms of it, what do you think are the pros and cons to those tools?
So, we are using those 4 tools right now. QMS, obviously, Greenlight for quality. We do have a PLM, ERP, and a CRM solution. We are trying to consolidate all of those. We are trying to make sure that, and by the way, we have a whole project management suite. I think everyone who's developing any software is using Jira or Confluence or something to that, something like that. So we are trying to bring all of these tools, making sure that they communicate. My goal is, I had come from Cisco. Cisco Optics, and they were basically building very complex products. My goal is to make sure that we have a complete insight into why, if there is a failure in the field, if there's a bug in the field, what is the impact? What is the economic impact of that happening? So, if I put this succinctly, we're using 4 or 5 different tools. But one of my biggest requirements whenever my director of software or hardware goes out and searches for the right solution or have searched for the right solution is that they have to be able to interoperate. And without interoperability, as I talked about scalability and intelligence, right? I'm sure that Greenlight is looking at the GPTs of the world and saying, okay, how do we include automatic surveillance of SOPs and various documents that are being uploaded into Greenlight Guru, and how do we make sure that these are well written and concise? So I want to be able to leverage all of these functionalities and all of these tools as and when they get implemented. That's why I need that connectedness.
Sam, just to say what you said, maybe a slightly different way. People like to work in the tools they like to work in. So whether that's like 4 in your case or 9 like the survey, or I've seen like some customers with like 20, like people want to work in the tool that they want to work in for their role, for their job, right? And you mentioned Jira, like there's software developers that like they have their IDE and they have Jira, that's it. Or maybe Slack, maybe.
Yes.
And that's it. And if your systems are not integrated with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, you don't have the real updated, you have some fictitious information in another system, but it's not a real representation of the work that's happening today. So I think that it almost doesn't matter if you are using 9 tools, that's okay, but can those 9 tools talk to one another, and can you get the harness that scale? Like, to me, that's a really important component.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I think, Michael, there's something interesting that you added there about, you're not getting the right picture. I think a big component of that is also a lot of times you're updating data manually between these systems. So you often get, mismatched data from different systems about the same aspect that you're looking at, which I think is a big problem, as you're trying to scale up and develop greater traceability across systems.
Or my favorite, hey, export that data from that system into Excel, then manipulate it, and then send it to somebody. It's like, wait, that's not right.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah, and I think, like you all said, the biggest risk is not being able or forgetting to make the link for activities, because it has to be handled in multiple software. So let's say my document control is not in the same software as my change management. Well, I might forget to identify what I change in between the 2 versions, or even to change the version, stuff like that.
Agreed.
Now, we've talked a lot about the challenges, but there can actually be some real benefits to having different tools. What are some of the benefits that maybe you've seen that outweigh? I mean, why have so many tools if there aren't benefits to outweigh some of these challenges?
I think for starters, you don't have stacks of papers lying around the entire office. And additionally, I think it's much easier to manage the data within the scope of that software. I think, the interoperability of software is a different question that you addressed, but just the change from doing manual tracking and Excel sheets, and by paper, I just don't also mean physical paper. It could be things like Word and Excel and PowerPoint as well. Just moving things off of that into systems that are inherently designed to make things more optimized and efficient makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference, even in a team size as small as 10 or 15 people. The visibility and the amount of work that you can get done by, and rather, let me put it this way, it reduces the overhead significantly in getting to the same endpoint in a more efficient manner and a more traceable manner.
Yeah.
And there are some software that are so special. Let's say SolidWorks or any other CAD software. I wouldn't want a company to focus on something else other than the CAD software. If it's so specialized, I wouldn't want Greenlight to develop a CAD software and an EQMS software, because I need to make sure both are optimized.
Yeah.
Right. Using the best in class means you're going to cross different companies and different pieces of software. So having the integration, or at least where it makes sense, that's critical, I think.
Yeah, it's a very good point, that if you try to be great at everything, it can be very hard to be good at anything sometimes. With all of these,
sorry, Jessica, it becomes an identity crisis for the people who are delivering the solution as well, right?
Yeah.
What are you trying to deliver? I think in the end, having a bunch of softwares that are application specific, that are need specific, is a good idea, as long as, again, they can interoperate. We live in a world of APIs, so I don't think that there is any issue there. But I think a reduction in complexity for the end user who is using that piece of software, they care about their dashboard, their particular function, and that's about it. Exposing them to a very complex piece of software, and I think the flattening of the learning curve is very important as well. I would say those 3 distinct things that your ecosystem of software has to deliver, which is a reduction of complexity, the flattening of the learning curve, and the improved insights and dashboards, application-specific insights.
And Sam, I want to throw this too, because I think this is like I heard this years ago and I loved it. A lot of times people don't know what's possible. Like, oh, I don't have to do this manually, or I can eliminate this 2 hours of thing that I do every week. So I didn't coin this phrase, I'm just using it, the art of possible. And I feel like that's where like having a conversation with somebody that's done something like this before, those integrations or those whatever, like, oh yeah, you can eliminate all this and you don't have to do this stuff manually anymore. Like that's the art of possible. I like to talk about like understanding what's out there, what can be done, like how can you eliminate extra work?
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. But a lot of folks don't know that things can be made to operate together seamlessly. Yeah.
Well, I think to tie into that, sometimes we take our previous experiences from, paper-based, and this is how we always did it, and we're trying to just take what we've always known and maybe use a different tool for it without even considering how we should change the nature of what we do to better leverage the tools. I think of text messages versus emails versus handwritten letters. What I would write in a handwritten letter is not at all what I would put into a text message. And by shifting how I'm working to better maximize that platform, that tool, I get better efficiencies there too.
Very true.
Yeah, I agree. So by the way, I'll just mention, we have a site in India, and a lot of the Indian companies, pharma companies, would manage their quality on spreadsheets. So a lot of the initial hiring that we did on the regulatory and compliance and quality side, the folks came out of the pharma companies in India. And initially it was going against the grain to say, okay, get out of the spreadsheets, get out of static, even though these are electronic methods of saving our data and so on. Let's get out of that mode and let's really get into document control, right? Let's look at workflows that allow for us to have approvals for documents to be authorized and make it seamless. I'm sitting in the US, you guys are sitting in India. If I need to approve a document, do I have to fly over there and physically sign it? I don't think so, right? So I think Greenlight Guru has been our not an advertisement for Greenlight Guru, but it's being our saving grace. And the mindset has expanded to say, okay, this is actually acceptable. What document control really means is not static paper that needs to be signed and stamped and put in a room so that someone has to check it out physically and read it and so on and look at it. So we have actually moved and shifted into this when we made the decision about 5 years ago.
Yeah, so the mindset shift of what we were before in terms of paper and spreadsheets and understanding that digitizing is more than just using Word versus handwriting, and ways to kind of think about some of the tools that we're using and what that means. So on the survey, here's kind of an interesting one. 75% of these 613 survey takers, they were from already commercialized companies. So it's a big number of already commercialized companies. 40% of those commercialized companies who are responding, they're using paper and spreadsheets to manage their QMS. Now, Sam, you already kind of started to talk about some of the downstream effects of using paper and spreadsheets, but I'd be curious from your point of view if there were any additional ones, or Damini, you had talked about how this isn't just using Word and Excel when we talk about digitizing. Where do we see the downstream impacts of paper?
Yeah, so I think the whole question is around controlled copy, right? Where is that controlled copy? My organization is spread across two different countries. Perhaps if you consider Ireland, we have a couple of folks there who, when they are looking at an SOP, when they are looking at a standard, what is the controlled copy that they're looking at? If you are going to be looking at paper and perhaps even managing your BOM on spreadsheets, we have a PLM system which we update and then transfer automatically, for example, to our manufacturer. And we basically any ECNs that take place are live transferred to the manufacturer. If you want to, I'll go back to the comment about timescales and I'll stop talking. If you're thinking about today, spreadsheets, paper might be okay, right? If you're thinking about scaling up and making sure that your organization is able to be a world contender, a global solution provider, you have to find the right solution for you, which, in all of these areas.
Right. And, to add to what Som mentioned, I think a big part of being a global leader is being able to pivot. And I think, one of the big areas is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is the changing regulatory landscape. So what worked in terms of, I'll take EU MDR as an example, MDD to MDR. What worked as a technical file for class 1 devices 5 years ago completely was overhauled. And, if you had a paper-based system, then you're basically creating your technical file from scratch. And if these are products that have been on the market for a while, it's a nightmare to put together all of that documentation. And that's one very tiny example in the grand scheme of things. I think the other thing, which is doesn't get talked about as much because it comes after the product reaches the market, is your post-market audits from your regulatory bodies. I think it is significantly easier to manage or to be prepared for those audits, as well as to demonstrate that you're doing everything you should be doing if you don't have a paper-based system. And, you have a well-designed QMS like Greenlight that, you're using and relying on. So I think, from my perspective, both of these areas are significant, problems with using a paper-based system for the long run. And, as I mentioned, paper-based, not just meaning physical paper, but even Word docs and spreadsheets and things like that.
Just to rebound on the audit, I think if you lived it before, you will remember, but the depressing moment you have to enter into the physical vault to find a document or the good version of a document during an audit, when you're working in a big company with an already established QMS. And, also non-conformity that can result of using paper is just missing links between documents. You update a document and then you don't recall that this other document is impacted too, and you should have updated it at the same time. So during the audit, first of all, you don't find the document, even if it exists, which is another NC if you don't find it in time, or you just realize during the audit that you have forgotten to update the other impacted documents related to the change.
Yeah.
Very, very true, Max. I think it's very easy to be surprised yourself in an audit about things you didn't know were happening in your QMS.
My background was product development versus the quality or regulatory side, and being that person who was taking my paper around for everybody to take a look and review. I dreaded the day that somebody set their coffee down on top of, and I dealt with the ring staining so that it was very difficult and challenging to read the comments that somebody had put on edits they wanted through there.
Yeah, so simple thing. Actually, I'll go to the PLM system also, right? Again, along with the QMS. I tend to, at night when I have time, just log into our PLM system and I can see our entire BOM. I can visually check the physical model that's been drawn in AutoCAD Inventor and so on, and I can actually I can basically see how we can optimize costs, etc. Right, on these complex things that we're making. So I think there are so many benefits to making sure that your QMS system is available. The other thing is CAPAs. We've had a CAPA where similar to Samsung, we had a battery supplier, for example, that wasn't perfect. So being able to have that the complete audit trail for that CAPA was very, very important for us. And I think through software, what I found is that our community of employees are able to learn. It's interesting. There is a bidirectional evolution of the employee or the user of the software. Even if you didn't know the regulatory constraints or you didn't know the rules, once you start using the software, because the software has embedded those tools, those rules within that, you start to understand what the process is. So it's a natural kind of evolution. And I think that is one of being a very good silent benefit of having our QMS system.
Yeah. Even if you don't know why you're not allowed to do it, somebody is educated on you're not allowed to do it, right?
Exactly.
I love that.
And you know, the good systems actually prompt you to ask questions of other people, like, hey, I can't do that. Why can't I do that? And then there's good explanations. So yeah, spot on.
Yeah, yeah.
I love education as a side benefit. So even when you move on to another organization and you start doing something different, if we start to turn the tide on everyone understanding what they can and can't do, little things like that make a huge difference. Now, with all of this technology and some of the different systems, and Michael, to your point earlier, that everybody wants to use the system that they want to use. So I've heard that it can be hard to get leadership to invest in some of these different modern software technologies. How have you had to encourage your leadership team, or have you had to encourage your leadership team to make a switch, to try something new?
I was at a company for 19 years, and we went from I think I was the 18th person in the company, and at one point, probably within a year or so from that time, we had 260 some people, and so we grew extremely rapidly, and you know, forces a lot of technology use when you scale that quickly. And one of the things that we did, this actually came from a lot of Army leadership people that started that company were prior infantry officers in Fayetteville, North Carolina, right outside of Fort Bragg. And they would come into what we called our large customer service technical support area, and they would work in the field, so to speak. They would do the job. And in doing the job, they would go, wow, you guys, I don't like this tool. This is really kludgy. And the person that's sitting next to them that does that every day, they would go, yeah, it is. And we've been telling people, but we haven't invested to change it, or it's been deprioritized. So then it takes away I'm going to sit in my office and let the company work. And you actually see some inefficiencies, some way things can be improved, whether it's communication or software or whatever. And those, we called them pit days, because our customer service area was called the pit. And so those corporate officers had to sit in the pit and do their pit day. And they would come back at the end of the day, and there would be a laundry list of things that leadership was now wanting to change because they saw it for themselves. So I think that's one way. Obviously, you can't do that when you're a 10,000 person organization, but things like that go a long way, I think.
And something that, you know, when trying to convince the leadership team to adopt EQMS is not talk about, and it's hard to put metric on it, but just to attract talent, you know, the best in class wants to work with the best in class system or organization. So we've had people in interview that, you know, we explained what we were doing or which software we were using, and some straight up said, like, if you were using a paper-based QMS, I wouldn't want to work there because they remember the pain, I guess, or something like that. So attracting talent and, you know, just reducing the risk of having NC or Kappa, like you said, Tom, which can cost a lot. It's hard to put me, you know, normally you convince people using Matrix. It's an easy way too. Like this is hard, but this is still something we need to take into account, the cost of not doing something.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll add to this, I think, is also we you know, IBT looks at an updated QMS as a competitive advantage with respect to others in our industry, just because I think you know, the lesser time we spend on audits or findings, the more time we have to do work that we actually want to do. You know, it helps us build better quality products and with more efficiency and effectiveness, which I think, again, is good for everybody, right? It's good for us as a company. We want to put out good products. It's good for our users. They want to use good products. And, you know, it keeps us compliant with things. It allows us to pivot from entering new global markets to getting, you know, new kind of regulatory submission ready very quickly. So I think companies need to start looking at a good, highly functioning QMS as a competitive advantage rather than a sunken cost to, you know, do something that they're forced to do because, you know, the FDA requires it or the EU requires it.
I agree. So, you know, we talk about going from spreadsheets directly to an eQMS system. But I think if you look at the evolution here, it was a piece of software that had to reside on a server at your site and so on, right? So going the cloud-based approach, and what I would define as a modern software or a modern solution is that you don't know where that solution resides. Of course, Greenlight Guru has got very, very good terms and conditions where you basically say, okay, we are backing up the data and so on, and that those assurances have to be there from a compliance perspective. But I think a modern piece of software is that, which is the end user doesn't have to think about the hardware resources that are required to run that piece of software, no matter where they are. Right. So if you want to offshore, you can offshore very, very quickly. So these are the types of solutions that I tend to focus on. And I think the world is moving that way as well. Right. So I think it's very, very important that we define what is modern software. And I think modern software is going to be a moving target. As I said, ChatGPT, the intelligence that comes into the software that not just is a grammar, old style grammar checker or something like that, but things that are alerting me or being fed the rules. We know compliance is all about rules, so having been fed all of these rules into the system, let the system decide if a document needs to be corrected or not. These are the things that I would say modern software, when modern software needs to be. I want all of these softwares to be tied together and tell me, hey, you can improve reliability of your product, and this is the exact cost to you because of this particular widget in your system is failing. Right. This is the amount of travel that your customer clinical support specialists have to do in order to support this system. So this is where I want to see. I would love to see the modern software or QMS systems go. But I think adoption is key. Where there is large adoption, you will drive down the cost, and the reward for the solution providers like Greenlight Guru will be higher. And you will then invest in more advanced functions, which I'm sure that you already are. But just a side note there.
But that's a good point, Sam, because that's how I feel like there's been a shift maybe the last 5 years with companies looking at the traditional, like, oh, I need to buy X amount of machines or X amount of servers, or I'm buying this software that's going to be hosted here, and we're doing this 5-year investment on this piece of software to host it. Like that conversation is now like a much older conversation, and you're seeing, oh, we're hiring 100 more people. Okay, we're going to get 100 more. They have those license costs for those type of things already built into that hiring projection too. So just the way that things are being approached is a more modern alignment, and how Greenlight is, kind of in that realm of modern software. It's cloud-based. It checks all those boxes for people that are moving in that direction.
Agreed.
I call them the teammate features. That's like the software will tell me, oh, you forgot something. This is usually something a teammate would tell me, but now the software with AI, with the like database integrated and stuff like that, they can say, hey Max, don't forget this.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I'll add to this is portability. Is that I think gone are the days when people expect to be chained to their desks to get anything with the QMS done. So I think the more modern QMS systems can be deployed on the go, I think given how much focus there is on remote work and work while travel, I think that would be a big factor, in my definition of modern QMS too.
Okay, so now that we've defined that modern QMS, do you think that if a company adopts it, do you think that they're more likely to be successful than a company that doesn't?
I feel very strongly about this, and I definitely think that a company that adopts a modern QMS is going to be more likely to succeed. And there's a lot of different small parts that come together. Firstly, it means that they're already open to change, which sets them up for success in all the other different areas of their company as well. And I think, for all the other reasons that, that everybody's discussed on the call, it makes it easier to enter new markets, makes it easier to launch a new product. It helps you stay compliant. You have lesser findings. You're doing lesser CAPAs, lesser, lesser non-conformances. All of that, I think, improve your efficiency. And you're building, better quality products, because I think that's what keeps the company's wheels rolling, right? Is more sales from good quality products and users that rely on you. So I think all of it ties up really nicely that way.
Yeah, I think absolutely, Damini, I agree with you there. The only addition I would say is that your team has to be prepared. The mindset has to be there that, look, we are about to embark on this journey, and it is a journey because there is a learning curve, right? With any software, there is going to be a learning curve, and there is going to be a commitment to learning. Right. If you don't have everyone kind of committed to saying, okay, this is the system I'm going to use. And we had that issue, right? There was resistance. I shouldn't say resistance. There was a little, perhaps, ignorance about how this is going to make a change. So I think, leadership investing, not just investing, but making sure that everyone is adopting the solution is key.
You bring up a very, very good point, I think, what I think has really helped our team in terms of being prepared for it is timing it correctly. Often when you're undertaking the process of converting to a newer modern version of your QMS, trying to do all of it at once or trying to time it right when you're launching a new product in the market, I think, you kind of have to think this through. As you mentioned, Som, is you have to be prepared for it. People need to be on board. And I think people need to time it correctly too.
Yeah, I agree.
Just to rebound on what you said, Som, the bigger you get, the more often I think you need to remind everybody why you're doing things, because it's easier for one person to forget and then spread it across the organization. So it's better to say things too often than not saying it enough. The consequences are bigger.
I had someone say this to me years ago. It's not a one-time presentation. Imagine it's a parade, and you have to continually say the same message to new people, even though they're the same people. Just think of it as a parade.
That's a very good point.
That's what we have done actually in India. And here, onboarding actually puts Greenlight and other tools squarely in the whole onboarding process, and we've actually cut out the time saying, look, this is important. Your performance is going to be assessed on how well you're using this tool. So immediately all eyes are on how do I do this? So use this.
And then to, I think, add a slightly different dimension to this, I think it also helps you gain credibility in the eyes of your auditors. Is that, what we've noticed is that when our auditors come on site and they see that, we are adapting our QMS to take in the best of what there is to offer, they treat the documents that we show them with and the workflows we show them with a lot more credibility, and they have a lot more faith in that we are doing the right things, which I think is also a very big win in the long run.
Yeah.
It's kind of summarizing what I heard for that is that it's not just the fact that you have a modern QMS, it's the fact that there's a mindset shift, that there's an organizational change. It's that the entire company is open to either constantly learning and evaluating or going through and changing the way that they approach things that helps with that success and being very deliberate in the way that they're working. Okay. Yep. We are out of time. I cannot believe how quickly this conversation has passed. I've really, truly appreciated hearing all of these different points of view. But it is crazy that we are, again, ready to head into kind of the next session. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you, Som, Michael, Damini, Max, for sharing all of this insightful information. Don't forget to head over to the MedTech Excellence community, where you're going to be able to ask more questions around these speakers, around these topics. Also, you're going to be able to get access to a free copy of the 2023 MedTech Industry Benchmark Report if you haven't seen that yet. Recording, yes, this session was recorded, and a copy of this recording will be posted online by the end of the day. Also, all sessions are recorded, so make sure you check in to see if there's any content that you may have missed. In terms of the slides, there were no slides for today, so if you're looking for slides from other presentations, yes, all of this would be included in there. And then certificates. Many of us, people are asking for certificates of attendance. Yes, you can request yours as well. You should be able to find the information on the Virtual Summit website or in a follow-up email. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this conversation today.